You and I know revolution hides. Evelyn signed away this dusty city garage in just 3 seconds. She never checked the address, never asked about the owner, and definitely did not hesitate. To her, it was just a tiny, worthless dot erased from a massive corporate expansion plan. Her pen kept moving. She had 46 more routine corporate acquisitions to sign before lunch. But world-changing ideas grow in the shadows. Behind those dusty walls, a massive secret waited for 6 years. A fully operational revolutionary engine prototype, and hidden right alongside it. All the proof showing her $2 billion automotive empire was built on a foundation she never actually owned. What happens when the most powerful auto executive finally faces undeniable proof that she simply cannot ignore or explain away? The humble shop sat on the corner of a totally forgotten, run-down industrial block, wedged right between a boarded-up print shop and a rusty freight depot running 3 days a week. From the street, the forgotten shop promised absolutely nothing. A hand-painted sign above the heavy door simply read, "Elijah's Auto, Independent Engine Service." The blue-painted letters were slightly uneven. The kind of sign a single father paints himself on a Saturday, because outsourcing it misses the whole point. Only one single power line ran to the overlooked building. A lone rattling exhaust fan was mounted in the brick wall, and a thin sliver of light glowed beneath the door when Elijah arrived long before sunrise every single morning. Inside, the tight layout had nothing to do with basic neatness and everything to do with absolute brilliant precision. Essential mechanic tools hung by their exact function along wooden pegboard racks. Every piece was outlined in dark marker, making a missing wrench obvious to him right away. Running quietly along the far back wall, a handwritten, color-coded chart tracked complex engine performance metrics across a massive range of temperatures. The exact visual map an overlooked genius builds when the massive automotive breakthrough in his head demands a physical reference. Nothing inside this modest garage was brand new, yet absolutely everything worked flawlessly. Stay with me here. On the ordinary morning that sparked this massive revolution, Elijah was busy diagnosing a highly complex transmission issue on a newer SUV. It belonged to a hard-working contractor who ran that heavy truck until the grinding gears could no longer be ignored. 3 flashy high-end shops had inspected the vehicle and demanded a complete, incredibly expensive transmission replacement. Elijah simply listened to the heavy engine idle for about 40 seconds. He placed one calloused hand flat against the warm valve cover. Then he walked over to his bench, pulling out a hand-drawn schematic he had drafted purely from memory, refining it with careful measurements gathered over 2 years of solo testing. He pointed to one tiny overlooked part, a $17 pressure relief valve that takes 20 minutes to swap. The anxious, exhausted contractor watched closely from the open garage doorway, wearing the exact look of someone struggling to believe the sheer genius he was witnessing. Elijah did not brag, and he certainly never over-explained his brilliant methods. He just offered to run a test after the quick fix, letting the flawless performance speak for itself. But here is the truth we usually overlook, the secret no paying customer ever thought to ask about. A whole section of the workspace hidden behind a thick canvas curtain stretching floor to ceiling across the back wall. It was locked tight, unlabeled, and completely overlooked by the world. Right there on the workbench near his tiny office, a folded envelope leaned against a dusty desk lamp. The sleek Meridian Motors corporate logo was stamped in deep blue on the top corner. Small, cold, and incredibly precise. Elijah received that corporate threat 4 days ago, tearing it open that very same night. He quietly scanned those 3 pages of corporate threats, folding the papers with absolute calm. He stared at the eviction notice, a storm he always knew would strike his humble shop. No panic, just quiet, steady focus. To understand why, we must look back 6 years to Meridian's sterile, towering corporate headquarters. Evelyn, their cold-eyed CEO, stood commanding a massive boardroom table, looking down on a grease-stained mechanic as if he were just some minor error on her multi-billion-dollar ledger. Her voice was pure, chilling ice. "You know the reason," she stated. No apology, just cold corporate reality. Elijah absorbed her dismissive words for a quiet moment, then stood up. He calmly pushed his heavy chair back, turned around, and walked right out. He didn't argue. He knew these shiny offices never valued what came from humble garages. Evelyn only saw an outdated shop to demolish, so he let her think she won. But she entirely missed the world-changing brilliance he carried right out that door. Later, inside his quiet garage, Elijah poured hot coffee and sat at his dusty workbench. He stood up, unlocked a dark back room, and gazed at his hidden masterpiece. Staring at the crude, unfinished prototype, he grabbed his mug and began to build. Meanwhile, Meridian's executive floor was custom-built to do one thing only: make wealthy suits feel incredibly important. Gigantic glass walls faced the sunset, bathing a sterile room in gold, a place where real genius is never actually born. They filled the space with overpriced, serious-looking furniture, a cheap illusion of intellect costing a fortune. Let's observe how this massive expansion was formally sold to their elite Wall Street investors. Evelyn stood dead center, smoothly delivering a memorized, high-stakes pitch with cold confidence. She paused just once when a skeptical investor demanded a precise financial figure. Her presentation ran 41 minutes, and the moment she finished, 3 massive institutional investors had already verbally committed to backing their upcoming multi-billion-dollar stock debut. They were chasing over $2 billion. The crown jewel of this hustle, a revolutionary compression engine. They named it ACE, a breakthrough tech that Meridian claimed they had engineered. A clean design offering 31% better fuel efficiency, performing flawlessly under extreme temperatures. They locked up patents for it across 44 different countries. High-paid legal teams vetted every single patent claim. Everything looked clean, totally, perfectly legal. Everyone in that sterile room believed this world-changing idea belonged to them. Down at the end sat Lucas, playing his part as their brilliant tech director. He confidently explained the global manufacturing plan for ACE. He spoke with the polished charm of a man who stole his best ideas, dressing up stolen mechanics' secrets into shiny billion-dollar investor slides. But right mid-pitch, things shifted. The screen flashed a highly detailed blueprint of the stolen engine core. The custom valves, the housing, the pure genius Elijah had quietly built in his dusty garage. Lucas pointed blindly at the display, then looked down at his stolen notes. One single, guilty second. He found his notes and kept talking. In those fancy rooms, nobody ever notices where real magic hides. The meeting soon shifted to their massive, glossy infrastructure expansion plan, swallowing up cheap, forgotten plots along the outer belt to build a flashy new research campus. Their lawyers coldly laid out the upcoming demolition plans. A clean timeline for bulldozing outdated, mostly forgotten old warehouses. Tiny independent workshops and dusty garages, 47 overlooked spaces in total. Evelyn grabbed the thick file and flipped right to the signature page. Page 1, 4 commercial warehouse leases. She signed without hesitation. Page 2, 9 light industrial units. Another quick, thoughtless signature. Page 3, line 11. A tiny corner in the outer district, officially listed as Elijah's Auto Independent Engine Service. She signed and moved on without looking up, just another dusty, overlooked dot on a map. Once the boardroom cleared out, she stood alone by the massive glass window, staring at the hazy outer district. You and I know that's where world-changing ideas are born. Just 3 weeks until the big stock offering, she had done her job. She never gave that tiny garage a second thought. She had already moved on. 2 days later, a polished black sedan pulled up at 9:22 in the morning. The man who stepped out wore a crisp gray suit and carried a slim leather briefcase. He walked straight up to the quiet garage, moving with the slow, arrogant confidence of a man used to sweeping away little people's dreams. Someone who had stopped expecting any real resistance long ago. He introduced himself quickly as a corporate representative from the Meridian Property Acquisition Legal Division. He dropped 3 folded pages onto the greasy workbench, completely uninvited. Then he coldly explained this dusty garage was being seized for their massive new development. The owner had exactly 72 hours to pack up and surrender his life's work. They offered a tiny, insulting payout based on the lowest municipal assessed value. And any desperate appeal filed after today would be tossed right out. He tossed his shiny business card onto the paperwork and just stood there waiting. Elijah read all 3 pages standing right there, refusing to be rushed. He slowly turned to the second page, reading every single line to the bottom. He carefully folded the papers back up, set them down, and quietly studied the suit. "Who signed this order?" he asked quietly. The suit smirked. "Executive authorization, the full board." Elijah just nodded once. "All right," he said. The clueless corporate suit grabbed his briefcase and walked out. Once the black sedan finally sped off, Elijah stood perfectly still. "Let's watch what happens next." A cheap fluorescent light hummed faintly above his messy, crowded workbench. Outside, a heavy truck rumbled past on the street. The ordinary world kept spinning, totally unaware of the revolution about to spark right here. Like a horizon when the morning fog finally lifts, nothing changed, just suddenly beautifully clear. He walked to the back, toward a stained canvas curtain hiding his secret. He popped the heavy padlock, pulled the curtain aside, and stepped inside. The hidden space was tiny, barely 15 square meters of room. But right in the center, bolted to a hand-welded steel stand, sat his engine. No glossy showroom paint, but you and I know this overlooked masterpiece is about to change the world. Let's study this direct injection setup, built into a variable compression housing. A brilliant adaptive valve timing architecture. Plus a thermal management system you won't find in any published engineering textbook. Elijah stood quietly beside this completely overlooked masterpiece. Cheap shelves around this dusty room held 14 bound technical journals. Every spine was marked by date in his scrawl, dating back 7 years. Tucked away on a cramped work table against the back wall. A beat-up computer and an old drive stored the entire engine development history. Every single test run, every measurement, iteration, and raw result. He didn't build this to fight back against corporate giant Meridian. He built it purely because the complex mechanical challenge fascinated him. Because the brilliant solution lived in his head long before he had cash. And when he finally scraped together enough free time and basic tools, he built it slowly in the shadows, not from paranoia but perfect precision. He just needed absolute certainty before revealing this massive tech breakthrough. But now a powerful billionaire CEO had forced his hand entirely. Sitting on a greasy stool next to his prototype motor, he called a number he hadn't dialed in almost 2 years. Diana picked up on the second ring. Her voice was sharp, like someone trained to wake up fast and expect trouble. Elijah skipped the small talk. "They're tearing down my garage," he told her plainly. "That hidden engine prototype I mentioned to you 3 years ago. It is here, completely intact. I have 72 hours left. Want to see it?" The silence on her end lasted exactly 3 seconds. "When?" she finally asked. "Stick with me." She was an investigative journalist who had spent the better part of 2 years building a massive corporate fraud case against Meridian. She was tracking huge inconsistencies in their declared corporate timeline for their engine compared to actual project records she held. Records quietly obtained through a trusted source who no longer worked there. She suspected massive executive fraud but lacked the hard evidence to publish. When Elijah first contacted her from his small shop 3 years ago, she listened closely but explained that a good story just wasn't enough. She required physical proof that independent engineering experts could actually test and verify. He swore the proof existed in the shadows, she just had to be patient. That patience now had a strict 72-hour window. Diana pulled up to his rundown garage before the city even woke. Elijah led her past the clutter to a dirty back curtain, pulled it aside, and stepped back. She slowly stepped inside and stared at the engine resting on its rusty test stand for nearly a full minute, completely speechless. Then she dropped her bag onto the dusty work table and opened her laptop. Pulling up a government website she had visited so often it loaded almost instantly. The official patent database, showing Meridian's major engine patent registration. She began reading the corporate specs aloud while Elijah stood right beside her. Neither of them said much for 20 solid minutes. As Diana read, Elijah pointed to his gritty journals, proving what we know, that true genius hides in the most overlooked places. You'd easily walk right past this dusty compression housing. Yet the math was flawless, right down to the seal ring's microscopic curves. That brilliant, revolutionary timing sequence. The exact same release blueprint. It matched the massive patent's thermal triggers, using the exact words this struggling father wrote in his dusty notebook 4 years ago. Even the unique fuel profile. A design so specific no one could have built it by accident. Every detail originated from the first of 14 worn, hand-bound notebooks. Diana froze. She stared at this forgotten masterpiece, then up at Elijah. "Tell me the timeline," she urged. He laid it out plain and unpolished. 7 years ago, back when he was a top engineer at Meridian. He began designing this world-changing engine after hours entirely on his own, scraping by with rusted tools inside a cheap, forgotten garage across town. This massive, brilliant breakthrough belonged to him. He filed his very first patent application exactly 5 years ago today. They threw it out, claiming some random nobody lacked the right paperwork. 14 months later, he tried again, but before they even processed that second application, Meridian fired him, accusing him of stealing their own corporate trade secrets. His dismissal was brutal, swift, and absolute. That heavy accusation paralyzed him while the company's aggressive lawyers swooped in. Within 18 months of firing him, Meridian got his stolen patent approved. Somehow, during that messy process, Elijah's own application had been flagged. It was quietly marked in the federal system as permanently withdrawn. He never withdrew it. Diana kept typing, her eyes locked on him. "Who inside Meridian could actually access your original filing?" she asked. Elijah sighed. "Someone with enough power to make a quiet breakthrough disappear, before it ever caused them any trouble. You and I couldn't say who did it, not from this forgotten garage. But the what and the when were suddenly glaringly obvious. Buried among greasy shelves and a cheap drive was a billion-dollar truth. Time was slipping away. This overlooked physical prototype was their only real shield. A basic digital file could easily be brushed off as a knockoff copied from their corporate patents. Without this overlooked piece of metal, corporate lawyers would shred his case. Diana glanced at the ticking timer on her screen. Just 48 hours remained before he lost this humble workshop forever. "I need a name," she urged, "an insider to put this on the record. Without a witness, court drags on for years. Their IPO launches in 3 weeks. Elijah leaned on the splintered doorframe, quietly staring at his forgotten masterpiece. "I know the man who knows everything," he muttered, "but he's never spoken." "I doubt he'll start now." Diana slammed her laptop shut. "Then we use what we have. We haul this incredible engine out tomorrow night." But the bulldozers arrived at 7:40 the next morning, 4 hours before the deadline they gave this struggling father. The lead vehicle carried 2 corporate suits from Meridian's greedy real estate division and a city compliance officer. Behind that overlooked van idled a flatbed and 2 corporate work vehicles. The crew chief held a clipboard, projecting a fake corporate energy that totally ignored the brilliant grit of this place. Whether the quiet creator losing his sanctuary actually wanted to go. But Elijah, an overlooked inventor and single father, was waiting by his rolling garage door. He wore his usual grease-stained canvas pants and a gray shirt, sleeves rolled right up. His heavy work boots were worn pale from years of quiet, groundbreaking, unseen labor. He looked like a man awake for hours, calmly deciding how he would protect his small workshop this morning. The corporate suit approached his target first. Following rigid protocols, he read aloud from a printed corporate property acquisition order. Elijah listened closely, completely silent. When the corporate suit finally finished talking, Elijah calmly pointed out a massive flaw hidden right inside their shiny corporate enforcement notice. He had quietly filed a formal objection through the city administration late last night, and according to local municipal code, they could not force an eviction while his objection remained pending, without a written official ruling. He pulled the small filing confirmation slip right from his pocket. Folded just once, he handed it over with absolutely zero emotion. The officer stared at the paper, glared at him, checked it again, and nervously stepped away to make a quick call. The demolition crew waited by their trucks, while Elijah quietly guarded his overlooked workshop. Nobody dared speak across the hot pavement. It was a tense 10 minutes. Then the second vehicle rolled up, a sleek, black corporate luxury sedan. The powerful CEO Lucas stepped out slowly from the passenger side. He paused on the sidewalk before scanning the dusty lot toward this tiny, forgotten garage. His eyes locked onto the faded, hand-painted sign, Elijah's Independent Engine Service. He stared at those simple words once, then read them again. Then he froze completely, the way people do when a buried piece of their past suddenly stares them in the face. Elijah noticed him at that exact same moment. across the empty pavement, right through the dusty, overlooked morning light. You and I are watching two old worlds collide, locking eyes for the first time in 6 years. Neither of them dared to make a single move. Elijah refused to step forward, and the mighty CEO simply could not look away. 6 heavy years of silence filled the space between them, saying more than either man could ever voice out loud. Lucas looked exactly like a titan who just remembered a deep truth he had been arranging his entire shiny corporate empire around trying to actively ignore. The quiet inventor's expression did not change. He stared back without an ounce of anger, an emptiness far more devastating than any screaming match could ever be. There was not a single accusation there. Just cold recognition and a deep patience that had survived 6 years, fully prepared to outlast this corporate titan too. The powerful CEO finally walked across the lot. He stopped 6 feet away, staring at that humble entrance like it was a haunted door he had been dodging his whole life. When the CEO finally spoke, his voice was quietly controlled, the strained tone of a man hiding massive corporate secrets right beneath the surface. "I didn't know," he muttered. "Not this property. I didn't know it was yours." Elijah studied him, keeping that exact same overlooked, completely unhurried calm. "But you knew other things," he said. "You and I know it wasn't an accusation. It was a raw, undeniable truth spoken from a forgotten place. No rage, making it cut deeper than any boardroom threat. In this dusty lot, corporate power met a truth it could not fight." Lucas stood there, completely silent. He looked at the peeling sign again, then down at the dust. Then back to Elijah. He looked like someone facing a massive, terrifying decision that he had spent years trying to avoid. For far too long, suddenly realizing he had finally run out of road. "Let's step inside that overlooked garage together, where Diana had worked since 6 a.m. While Elijah delayed the executives outside, she quietly copied the breakthrough files in the back. 3 hard drives plus a backup on a secure cloud server. And a complete paper trail. Secured for the patent attorney she had called from this humble shop just 2 nights ago. She worked with absolute quiet precision. Time was running out, and this hidden world-changing technology was irreplaceable. By the time the corporate lawyer returned to admit the legal block held up, stalling their eviction for 24 hours, Diana was completely ready. She slipped out the side door with a heavy canvas bag over her shoulder, giving Elijah a silent nod as she passed him on the driveway. The demolition crew loaded back into their trucks. Lucas paused a bit longer near the edge of the dusty lot. Looking at the rundown shop, his cold expression softened, hinting that he might actually make the right choice. Elijah watched them drive off, then turned back and stepped into his humble workspace. He brewed cheap coffee and sat at his bench, looking at the simple tools on the wall. Each lay in its faded outline, perfect order hidden inside a chaotic workspace. He spent 6 long years building this forgotten sanctuary. You and I know he never doubted the world-changing invention hidden in that back room, knowing that honest, dirty labor every single day was its own undeniable proof. The clock kept ticking, only 24 hours left to save it. The telephone rang at 1:17 in the morning. The caller was completely unknown to Elijah, but the late hour and tense silence made him listen with total focus, completely bypassing the groggy haze of a man who had just woken up. "It is Lucas," the tight voice said. Elijah sat up in the darkness and remained silent, which was a heavy answer of its own. "I have something you need," Lucas continued, his voice tight with regret. The sound of an executive who practiced tough speeches, only to realize that doing the right thing feels completely different. Project absorption. That was their corporate code for stealing your brilliant engine design and burying its true origin. I copied the entire file, the approvals, the names. Every timestamp and message is right here. The exact order they used to bury your patent under fake delays. It goes to the very top, he said, finally stopping. Elijah held the phone tight, staring at the ceiling. "Why now?" he asked. The silence on the line stretched, feeling heavy with a sudden, painful honesty. "Because I saw your sign today," Lucas whispered at last. "What do you and I make of this? A world-changing truth arriving years late, finding the rusty garage door still open." For 40 minutes, they talked. Lucas joined Meridian as a tech lead before they threw Elijah out into the cold. After Elijah lost everything, Lucas climbed straight to Chief Technical Officer. The executives handed him the finished engine files to push straight into mass production. Lucas realized immediately that this brilliant technical design did not originate in some shiny corporate lab. The engine architecture was simply flawless, far too perfectly engineered to come from standard corporate research. It held the soul of a genius working in the shadows for years. Lucas knew exactly whose stolen genius he was holding, and he made his choice. "I cannot undo what I did," Lucas confessed, "but I will put what I know in writing on the record for whoever needs to hear it." Elijah asked for his terms. Lucas laid them out clearly. He promised to sign the sworn paperwork and act as a cooperating witness once that physical garage prototype was fully verified by an independent tech expert and processed through proper legal channels. He needed absolute certainty his confession was not their only weapon, that the raw, greasy evidence from the shop supported his story completely. Then he warned, "The public offering is the day after tomorrow. If you are going to do this, it has to be tomorrow night. Once the sale closes, the company's legal shield triples overnight. They will bury this in court for years if they get past the launch." Elijah understood completely. "We both know true greatness starts here." Elijah stepped to his dusty workbench, flipped the lamp, and grabbed paper. He wrote names and times, mapping out his fight against the corporate giants completely by hand. Just how he always solved his most difficult engine problems. Not because the ink made his battle feel more real, but because drawing the blueprint always exposed exactly where the corporate system could break. They still faced one giant weak spot. His revolutionary prototype remained locked inside that dusty, overlooked garage. Luckily, Lucas could bypass their high-tech security using his master passwords as chief technical officer, an advantage that would instantly vanish the moment he stopped playing nice with Meridian, which meant they only had a tight 18-hour window to pull this whole thing off. He called Diana at 2 in the morning. She answered fast, clearly waiting for it. Hearing the plan, she said, "I know where the launch event is tomorrow night. Everyone who needs to hear this truth will be in the same room." Elijah thought about that sterile corporate gala. "That's not where I plan to take it," he said. "I know," Diana replied softly, "but that is where it will do the absolute most." The heavy silence that followed was not born of fear. It was the quiet acceptance of a creator realizing his 6 years of dusty, greasy labor would finally hit the big stage, finally taking a concrete shape. A collision they never predicted, yet both recognized completely. "Tomorrow night," Elijah agreed at last. The Grand Hotel sat at the very peak of the city's wealthiest corporate tower. Now picture the scene inside that high society investor reception. That 32nd floor ballroom screamed, the sterile luxury designed to make billionaires open their wallets. Tables draped in white linen sat under glaring spotlights aimed at a massive stage. And you and I know that expensive open bar was doing serious heavy lifting. Look inside this glitzy hall, 200 wealthy investors waiting. 14 managing directors representing the city's heaviest capital. Even the market regulators sent their top officials. Plus 30 financial reporters clutching golden tickets to get past. The heavy doors, mingling with crowds desperate to hype the next big tech breakthrough this city had witnessed in a generation. Evelyn glided through the crowd, acting like she owned the world, calculating every step. With slick corporate charm, she made every wealthy investor believe they were the only VIP there. Just weeks from a massive IPO, her hollow empire seemed unstoppable. Tonight was about watching that glossy machine do exactly what empty empires do when running smoothly. She had no reason to worry about the details. In fact, she felt completely untouchable up there. On the main stage, the glowing Meridian Motors logo shone brightly against a massive dark screen. Glossy, massive, and engineered to dazzle investors with deep, empty pockets. She watched it, soaking in a brief moment of unearned corporate pride. Then she effortlessly worked the next room. Lucas arrived, playing his part as her loyal technical director. He was slated to deliver a slick 7-minute pitch tailored for investors and stand ready for private backroom talks with any wealthy buyer eager to explore the ace engine specs before signing a check. He had memorized this corporate script. He knew the lies. He built her pitch deck, but never planned to show it. But you and I know the real revolution was parked 3 blocks away in a rusty van. Elijah sat in the dark passenger seat, the engine cold. Behind him, strapped to a rusty dolly, sat the genuine grease-covered prototype. He hauled it from his dusty, shuttered garage at 11:45 last night. Lucas used backdoor access to bypass the high-tech Meridian security. A small, determined crew, Elijah, Diana, and a sharp patent lawyer, plus an independent engineer dragged out of bed at the last minute who stared at Elijah's real invention in total silence before signing his approval. They carefully cataloged every crude part of that brilliant build, verifying it directly against 3 battered copies of Elijah's original notebooks and raw blueprints. That certified proof signed by the expert sat inside the lawyer's briefcase. Diana stepped into the glamorous hotel lobby at 8:45, clutching fake media badges and a canvas bag holding 12 sealed envelopes, each one packed with a 16-page truth bomb. Proof linking Elijah's original garage notes to Meridian's stolen patent designs. Leaked blueprints from Lucas, validated by the certified word of an independent expert. She knew precisely which 12 journalists in that crowd were hungry for real truth. She tracked every one of them down in 20 minutes. We watch her quietly deliver the proof that changes everything. We know world-changing ideas rarely start in ballrooms, but at 9:15 the host demanded attention anyway. Lucas stepped onto the stage, lingering at the podium before slowly opening his laptop. The entire ballroom fell into a heavy, expectant silence. It is the kind of quiet rich investors make when expecting to hear exactly what they want. Behind him, the massive screen flashed the sleek corporate logo. Lucas stared at his polished slides, then slowly scanned the wealthy audience. "I was asked to speak tonight about the core design of the adaptive compression engine," he announced. His voice was completely steady, showing zero trace of fear. He sounded like a man choosing truth over the crushing weight of a massive corporate lie. The ACE system is central to this pitch. Every investor here was promised that Meridian Motors created and owns this groundbreaking engine design. I have been one of the executives selling you that exact story. He paused for 2 full seconds. That is false. I know because they handed me stolen blueprints, ordering me to claim them as corporate property. Tonight, I refuse to play this game any longer. Nobody in that wealthy crowd reacted right away. 3 agonizing seconds dragged by. It takes time for powerful elites to digest a raw truth that completely shatters their elaborate multi-million-dollar illusion. Then swift and quiet chaos swept through the room. Urgent whispers erupted everywhere as shocked executives slammed their crystal glasses down. The federal securities regulators sitting at the very closest table traded sharp glances of immediate, undeniable legal recognition. Over by the bar, the ruthless CEO Evelyn heard every single word. She caught it all, setting her drink on a tray and freezing like a statue. Suddenly, the heavy side doors of the ballroom swung open. Look closely. Elijah wheeled in a rusted dolly, carrying his revolutionary prototype hidden under a dark tarp. The single father was still covered in garage grease. Dressing up to impress elites meant absolutely nothing to him. The wealthy crowd instinctively parted as he rolled his heavy machine forward. This was no flashy, perfectly rehearsed Silicon Valley launch. People simply backed away as a gritty mechanic shoved a massive, heavy cart straight through their pristine corporate party. He planted his cart right in the center of everything. Reaching down, he whipped the dark canvas off his true masterpiece. A breakthrough engine sat beneath the elegant chandeliers, bolted to a crude steel frame, looking exactly as it had in his dusty, overlooked garage for the past 6 years. It was not polished or sleek. It did not reflect the fancy spotlights like those stolen, mass-produced corporate parts did. But you and I know the truth, that was pure, unpolished brilliance. Every trained engineer in the room recognized the sheer magnitude of his genius within 10 seconds. Elijah locked eyes with Evelyn across the silent, crowded room. She stared right back at the very man she had tried to ruin. For the first time, the untouchable CEO did not look like she was plotting her next ruthless move. He never walked over to her, and he never even raised his voice. But his quiet words sliced through the air, leaving no room for anyone to misunderstand his warning. You signed the order to bulldoze my small garage without ever checking what I was building. That was your one fatal error. He held her stunned, silent gaze for a long moment. And there it was, the mighty CEO fell dead silent. No corporate spin could save her stolen monopoly once the truth of that humble garage came to light. The exchange officials were already rising to their feet. Diana snapped photos of the overlooked engine design as 14 reporters opened their notebooks. A legal director from a massive backing firm bolted for the exit, whispering frantically into his phone. Elijah stepped back from his overlooked garage prototype and just waited. After waiting 6 long years in that dusty garage, a few extra minutes meant absolutely nothing. 3 months dragged on, just as world-shifting months always do. Loud courtroom battles echoed in public, masking the quiet revolution happening behind the scenes. A quiet, relentless shift of truth and power was happening underneath. The massive corporate initial public offering froze the morning after the reveal. Federal authorities stepped in right at the Grand Meridian Hotel. Everything stopped for a massive engine patent investigation. Wall Street backers pulled their money out without saying a single word. Huge institutional investors grabbed their cash and quietly vanished overnight. The Underdog's revolutionary engine patent was fully restored by federal authorities. His administrative review held strong, backed by 14 dense technical journals. The gritty hardware logs and independent engineering tests proved his genius, along with the internal corporate theft files provided by Lucas. And that original time-stamped filing which survived the corporate purge became the ultimate weapon. Let's look at this. Together, the examiner called it a bulletproof record, proving he built it first. That brilliant, greasy garage prototype was safely locked away in certified storage. The breakthrough engine patent sat in trust while the legal battle raged, which simply meant nobody. Neither the giant corporation nor the struggling dad could sell the technology until ownership was settled. Elijah accepted this without hesitation. A small price, he could wait. Evelyn surrendered her powerful CEO title during a rushed board meeting 10 days later. The swift boardroom vote took place behind closed doors, avoiding a media frenzy. They did not forcibly escort her from the massive building. She walked out of the massive automotive tower that Wednesday afternoon, wearing an icy, calm face. The look of an elite executive who accepted defeat and walked away without throwing a tantrum. Federal financial crimes investigators quickly followed. They were only 2 weeks behind her, armed with the explosive testimony Lucas had willingly provided. The massive civil and criminal trials would now drag on for years. The final verdict remained unwritten, but the bones of her giant automotive empire, that $2 billion kingdom built on stolen garage secrets nobody was ever meant to find, was already collapsing completely at its most critical foundational joints. Lucas took a plea deal, which demanded absolute honesty about the theft. He handed over the paper trail to save himself from serious prison time. He abandoned the massive corporation that very week. His name went down in federal logs as a cooperating witness, not the main corporate villain. Was this true justice or just a partial victory? You and I know that real-world justice is always much messier than that. But nobody who watched this overlooked garage mechanic change the world cared to debate it. He finally stepped up when it mattered, even if he was late. Stick with me here. You and I know both of those facts were true. Diana's deep dive investigation was published across 3 national magazines. It read like a historical record, not just a flashy, fleeting headline. Methodical, thoroughly sourced. Solid enough to stand up in court, yet simple enough for everyday readers. She tracked the federal trials for 3 months before chasing her next story. Exposing the massive corporate giant had taken 2 full years. Over that time, she learned to trust the quiet, unglamorous patience that brings real breakthroughs. That demolition order on his tiny garage, canceled indefinitely the second that massive project got frozen under federal review as part of a massive fraud investigation. They finally unsealed that rolling steel door on a Tuesday. The corporate keypad was tossed, replaced by Elijah's heavy, rusted old padlock. The overlooked little shop went back to business with zero fanfare. Elijah repainted his front sign that Saturday using the same cheap, faded colors. Crooked letters that proved this was still just a humble, ignored auto shop. A single dad's bare hands and honest work. His name stamped on a garage built through 6 years of completely ordinary mornings. He hung up his wrenches and straightened those flickering, cheap, fluorescent lights. Then he brewed cheap coffee on a greasy hot plate near his workbench. Diana walked in mid-morning, carrying fresh coffee from across the street. She paused right there in the doorway, scanning the dusty bays before staring into the back room. The tarp was gone, and the test stand was empty. Those shelves now held only greasy notebooks and an ancient computer waiting to be boxed. Without his revolutionary prototype engine, the small space felt incredibly quiet and clean. It had the peaceful look of a room that finally surrendered its massive secret. You and I should pause here with her, taking in this completely unremarkable garage. Faded pegboard walls, peeling charts, and worn tools resting in their traced outlines. She realized that for a space harboring the greatest technical breakthrough of our generation, it looked exactly like the gritty, overlooked spot it had always been. Just a struggling auto shop, tucked away on a quiet street run by a single dad turning wrenches. "What do you do with the Ace design now?" she asked him. Elijah took his cup, looking past the open bay doors toward the crumbling street outside. The rusty freight depot across the road. Pale morning light warmed the asphalt as the ordinary world kept on grinding. "Build it for real," he replied, this time not to prove a point. Out in the main service bay, the steady rumble of an engine broke the silence. An old four-cylinder sedan a neighbor left yesterday, hoping for a quick fix. It idled with a soft, uneven rattle, the exact kind of tiny spark plug misfire most people would easily overlook. Elijah immediately turned toward the noise. He set his coffee on the workbench, grabbed a blank diagnostic sheet from the stack, and walked back to work. The bay doors were wide open. His everyday work was waiting. He signed away the shop, but great ideas are rebuilt from forgotten scrap. No words were needed. Morning light hitting those dusty engine parts revealed a world-changing future.